tariffs, manners. There was no end to it. What else? Luke stepped forward. The plans for the large weapons you commanded your servants to design, Master. He put 3 large sheets of parchment on the desk. Weaver looked at the neat tracery on the first and frowned. You may come near me, he said. Show me how these are meant to operate. Luke pointed to the first drawing. This is the barrel of the weapon, Master, he said. As you commanded, it is rifled so that the missile will spin. Here the missile is inserted at the breech according to your direction. Here is the mechanism which turns and aims the weapon as you commanded. It is shown in great detail on this second sheet. And here on the third is the missile itself. It is hollow and filled with explosive powder as you ordered, and there is in the tip a device which will attract it to the target. Weaver gravely nodded. Has it been tested? In models only, Master. If you direct, the construction will begin at once. Good. Proceed. How many of these can you make for me within a month? Luke hesitated. Few, Master. At first all must be done by hand methods. Later it will be possible to make many at a time, 50 or even 100 in 1 month. But for the first 2 or 3 months, Master, 2 weapons in a month is all that your unworthy servants can do. Very well, said Weaver. See to it. He turned and examined the large globe of the planet which stood on his desk. Here was another product of his genius. The Terranovans had scarcely had maps worthy of the name before his coming. The 3 major continents trailed downward like fleshy leaves from the North Pole. He had called them America, Europe, and Asia, and they were so lettered on the globe. In the southern hemisphere, besides the tips of Europe and Asia and fully a third of America, there was a 4th continent shaped rather like a hat, which he had called Australia. There was no Africa on Terra Nova, but that was small loss. Weaver had never thought highly of Africa. The planet itself, according to the experts who had been assigned the problem, was a little more than 10,000 miles in diameter. The land area, Weaver thought, probably amounted to more than 50 million square miles. It was a great deal to defend, but it must be done. Here is your next assignment, he told Luke. Put a team to work on selecting and preparing sites for these guns when they are built. There must be one in every 1,000 square miles. Luke bowed and took the plans away. For otherwise, Weaver thought somberly, another ship might land some day, and how could I trust these children not to welcome it? Sunlight gleamed brilliantly from the broad white marble plaza beyond the tall portico. Looking through the windows, he could see the enormous block of stone in the center of the plaza, and the tiny robot air car hovering near it, and the tiny ant shapes of the crowd on the opposite side. Beyond, the sky was a clear, faultless blue. Are you ready now, Master? Asked Luke. Weaver tested his limbs. They were rigid and almost without sensation. He could not move them so much as a fraction of an inch. Even his lips were as stiff as that marble outside. Only the fingers of his right hand, clutching a pen, felt as if they belonged to him. A metal frame supported a notepad where his hand could reach it. Then he wrote, "Yes, proceed with the statue." Luke was holding a tiny torpedo-shaped object that moved freely at the end of a long jointed metal arm. He moved it tentatively toward Weaver's left shoulder. Outside, the hovering aircar duplicated the motion. The grinder at its tip bit with a screech into the side of the huge stone. Weaver watched, feeling no discomfort. The drug Luke had injected was working perfectly. Luke moved the pantograph pointer again and again until it touched Weaver's robed body. With every motion, the aircar bored a tunnel into the stone to the exact depth required, and backed out again. Slowly a form was beginning to emerge. The distant screech of the grinder was muffled and not unpleasant. Weaver felt a trifle sleepy. The top of one extended arm was done. The aircar moved over and began the other, leaving the head still buried in stone. After this, Weaver thought, he could rest. His cities were built, his churches founded, his guns built and tested, his people trained. The Terranovans were as civilized as he could make them in 1 generation. They had literary societies, newsstands, stock markets, leisure and working classes, baseball leagues, armies. They had to give up their barbaric comfort, of course, so much the better. Life was real, life was earnest. Weaver had taught them that. The mechanism of his government ran smoothly. It would continue to run with only an occasional guiding touch. This was his last major task, the monument. Something to remember me by, he thought drowsily, myself in stone, long after I am gone. That will keep them to my ways, even if they should be tempted. To them I will still be here, standing over them, gigantic, imperishable. They will still have something to worship. Stone dust was obscuring the figure now, glittering in the sunlight. Luke undercut a huge block of the stone, and it fell, turning lazily, and crashed on the pavement. Robot tractors darted out to haul the pieces away. Weaver was glad it was Luke whose hand was guiding the pantograph, not one of the bright, efficient younger generation. They had been together a long time, Luke and he, almost 10 years. He knew Luke as if he were a human being, understood him as if he were a person, and Luke knew him better than any of the rest, knew his smiles and his frowns and all his moods. It had been a good life. He had done all the things he set out to do, and he had done them in his own time and his own way. At this distance it was almost impossible to believe that he had once been a little man among billions of others, conforming to their patterns, doing what was expected of him. His free hand was growing tired from holding the pen. When all the rest was done, Luke would freeze that hand also, and then it would be only a minute or so until he could inject the antidote. He scribbled idly. "Do you remember the old days before I came, Luke?" "Very well, master," said the apostle, "but it seems a long time ago." "Yes," Weaver told himself contentedly, "just what I was thinking. We understand each other, Luke and I." He wrote, "Things are very different now, eh?" "Very different, master. You made many changes. The people are very grateful to you." He could see the broad outlines of the colossal figure now, the arms in their heavy ecclesiastical sleeves stretched in benediction, the legs firmly planted. But the bowed head was still a rough, featureless mass of stone, not yet shaped. "Do you know," Weaver wrote on impulse, "that when I first came I thought for a time that you were savages who might want to eat me." That would startle Luke, he thought, but Luke said, "We all wanted to, very much. But that would have been foolish, master. Then we would not have had all the other things, and besides, there would not have been enough of you for all." The aircar screeched, driving a tunnel along the edge of the parted vestments. God felt a cold wind down the corridor of time. He had been that close after all. It was only because the natives had been cold-bloodedly foresighted that he was still alive. The idea infuriated him, and somehow he was still afraid. He wrote, "You never told me of this. You will all do a penance for it." Luke was dabbing the pointer carefully at the bald top of Weaver's head. His horny, complicated face was unpleasantly close, the mandibles unpleasantly big even behind his mouth veil. Luke said, "We will very gladly, except that perhaps the new ones will not like it." Weaver felt bewildered. In one corner of his mind he felt a tiny darkness unfolding, the kernel of doubt, forgotten so long but there all the time, growing larger now, expanding to a ragged, terrifying shape. He wrote, "What do you mean? What are the new ones?" Luke said, "We did not tell you. We knew you would not like it. A spaceship landed in Asia 2 months ago. There are 3 people in it. One is sick, but we believe the other 2 will live. They are very funny people, master." The pantograph pointer moved down the side of God's nose, and another wedge of stone fell into the plaza. "They have 3 long legs, and a very little body, and a head with 1 eye in front and 1 behind. Also they have very funny ideas. They are horrified at the way we live, and they are going to change it all around." Weaver's fingers jerked uncontrollably, and the words wavered across the page. "I don't understand. I don't understand." "I hope you are not angry, master," said Luke. "We are very grateful to you. When you came we were desperately bored. There had been no new thing for more than 7,000 years, since the last ship came from space. You know that we have not much imagination. We tried to invent new things for ourselves, but we could never think of anything so amusing as the ones you gave us. We will always remember you with gratitude." The pantograph was tracing Weaver's eyelids, and then the unfeeling eyes themselves. "But all things must end," said Luke. "Now we have these others, who do not like what you have done, so we cannot worship you any more. And anyway, some of the people are growing tired. It has been 10 years, a long time." One thought pierced through the swirling fear in Weaver's mind. The guns, built with so much labor, the enormous guns that could throw a shell 200 miles. The crews, manning them night and day to destroy the first ship that came from space. And they had never meant to use them. Anger fought with caution. He felt peculiarly helpless now, locked up in his own body like a prison. "What are you going to do?" he scrawled. "Nothing that will hurt, master," said Luke. "You remember I told you long ago we had no machines for killing before you came. We use other things, like this drug which